Support for this podcast comes from Frito-Lay and the 2023 Snack Bracket Championship. The Frito-Lay Snack-It Challenge is underway, and fans are voting on their favorite snacks to crown champion. We're talking about prime-time matchups between the best 64 snacks in the land. Will Ruffles Ridges reign supreme? Can Doritos defend their dynasty? Or will Smart Food use their smarts for a surprise upset? Only you can decide. Get in on all the action for a chance to win up to $1,000 or a year's worth of snacks. Let your snacks be heard. Just go to fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com to vote and enter for a chance to win. No purchase necessary. Sweepstakes ends April 3rd, 2023. Void where prohibited. Year's worth of snacks awarded in the form of 52 coupons, each good for one bag of chips. See official rules at fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com.
What's happening tonight, fans? Happy homecoming. Welcome to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. I'm Jeff Sharon, along with Eric Lopez. And Eric, homecoming once again. Do you have a fond homecoming memory?
I feel like this is my own personal homecoming. I didn't get a chance to be on last week. Brian Murphy filled in, so I feel like this is my own personal homecoming right now. So
welcome back.
Welcome back. I appreciate Brian filling in as I took care of some of the things. But homecoming memories, wow. I don't know if I really jump out one. I know everybody does the whole pond thing on the Friday tradition if you're a student. I remember that as a student, but usually games aren't that interesting in the homecoming games, except for that one year. I think we hosted Houston in 2009. That was probably the one that jumps out. We knocked off nationally ranked Houston on that noon Saturday.
Right.
In fact, that would be my number one homecoming memory that weekend, because if you remember, the night before, men's basketball opened the season against UMass at home, and they were their blacks, and they won the game. Mm-hmm. And then the next day, UCF knocked off Houston in that noon game, first ever win against ranked teams. So I guess that would be
I was there on the sideline for that. I was working for UCF at the time, and that was a heck of a game to be a part of. Houston seemed ripe for the picking that game, I remember.
I was actually, weird thing about that game is I was in the stands sitting with our mutual friend Matt Brodsky, who at that time, he now works at he's been working at CBS Sports .com for like years. But back then his schedule was a little more flexible. He would come to a game a year for UCF after graduation. I meet up with him, but I sat with him for that game. We'll see how many people get to sit this homecoming.
Right. Well, one of my fond memories of homecoming was actually homecoming my senior year. This was 2004. This was the 0-11 year. We lost to, this was Ohio, and that was the one where Matt Prater missed the extra point in overtime. We went to overtime, tied at 10. Ohio scored. We scored right back. Kyle Israel actually got into that game and as a freshman, and Prater missed the extra point that ended the game. But what I remember most about that game, I was underneath that goalpost next to Jerry O'Neal when it happened. It was just stunning when it happened. But what I remember was I was shooting video of the game for Nightly News, which was the student TV news program, and I'm shooting the events at halftime. And they announced the homecoming queen. I can't remember her name that year. Somebody emailed me with whoever was the homecoming queen that year, but I can see her face. And they announced her name over the PA at the Citrus Bowl, and I'm kind of right in front of her and the other 4 or 5 couples that are there. And loud as a bell, they read off her name, and I hear her go, "Holy blank!" Right when they announced her name, which let's be honest with you, if you're announced as the homecoming queen or king, that's exactly what you're thinking when that happens. But it was right there on my camera and my microphone. I'll just never forget it.
Right.
And I showed it to my friends. I showed it to my friends Kelly and Matt and everybody in the edit bays in the school communication the next day. And we just kept replaying it because we were dying laughing. It was so funny. I don't know what it is about that, but anyway, whoever that was, homecoming queen in 2004. Thank you for providing us with one heck of a moment, because that was hilarious. All right, so let's dive into the show. We've got plenty to cover here. UCF is playing East Carolina at home. ECU comes in 1-5. They are not good. UCF obviously coming off of the now. Okay, so let's talk about this Cincinnati game. Let's put a bow on this thing real quick. So UCF now moves up in the polls, knock off Cincinnati in Cincinnati, 53-21. The Knights are now number 22 or 21, depending on the poll you look at. They scored 53 points in 15 minutes of possession and change against the Bearcats. Just an incredible offensive performance. The game was stopped after 3 quarters plus 4 seconds because of just a massive storm system rolling through the southern Ohio area. But the Knights score 53 points in 15 plus minutes of possession in 3 quarters. Scored on all 8 possessions, 7 of them touchdowns. Gosh, I mean, what a performance against Cincinnati! And I'll be honest with you, I was a little worried, and I got called out by some people, rightfully so. Why are you worried heading into this game? Because I'm worried about the road dog and the wounded dog at home and all that kind of stuff. And well, guess what? We took care of business. So, what did you think about that game? I was just dumbfounded by the offensive performance and the defensive performance, to be honest with you, despite a lot of penalties.
Well, you and Chris Felica was worried. I think the Bear in GameDay actually picked Cincinnati to cover the spread.
And forgive me, it was 51-23 was the final. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, it was a long night. First of all, Cincinnati's terrible.
Yeah, they're not good.
They're not very good.
Luke Fickell has a long road ahead of him. Not that he can't do it, but he's got a long road ahead of him.
Well, especially on the defensive side of the ball, where that they just didn't match up with UCF at all. I mean, there was wide open guys in the first quarter. Traquan Smith, Snelson. I mean, they just couldn't match up at their speed. They just couldn't match up with them athletically.
It looked like they had at times like 9 guys on the field on defense against our offense. And I mean, Milton was 16 of 19 for 374 and 5 touchdowns. Smith had 5 catches for 165 yards and 3 touchdowns, including a 79-yarder. Plus, he scored on a 5-yard rush, so he had 4 total touchdowns on the day. I mean, it was like Madden rookie mode out there.
It was, and I think UCF kind of attacked them in the they knew they had an advantage there. They attacked the Cincinnati secondary, and they did that early and jumped on them early. And I thought that was important to set the tone early. You didn't want to come out there and give Cincinnati some confidence. I mean, Hayden Moore, the quarterback at Cincinnati, has been there 100 years now. It can actually sling it a little bit. So I thought that was important that they jumped on them. And I know some people have made some big deal about defensively giving up some plays and the penalties. I don't really get too caught up in that because, first of all, you're never going to play 12 great games. I'm a believer that every, whether it be the offense, the defense, or the team as a whole, you're going to have a couple games here where you just don't play well. So I rather than not play well against a team that they can handle instead of a team that actually can beat them, like Navy or, you down the road with USF. So I don't take too much of it from the defensive side. It happens. I know some people are concerned about the penalties. I'm not, because I think the approach is you got to play freely and aggressive, and when you play freely and aggressive, you're going to commit some penalties. Doesn't mean you can't clean some of it up, but I rather than play aggressive and freely and maybe at the expense of a penalty or two than playing tentative. Okay, mm-hmm. And all of a sudden now you're playing in back of your heels because you're worried about committing a penalty. So I think penalties numbers also get a little overblown and are very overrated at times because it's not so much how many penalties, but what type of penalties.
Right.
That's what I for. Because look, if a secondary kid gets beat deep by a receiver and he holds grabs his jersey so he does make sure he doesn't give up a touchdown, that's a good penalty. If a kid, for example, is going after, trying to be aggressive on a play, that I can handle that. I think it's the dumb penalties that you worry about more so than the frequent penalties.
Yeah, I mean, there were penalties of. To me, there's 2 kinds of penalties. There are penalties of effort, and then there's penalties of stupid, right? The penalty of stupid is your late hits, 12 men on the field, those delay of the game, those kinds of things. UCF actually committed 8 penalties for 44 yards. Now, a number of them were on defense, to be fair, and they were, but most of them were penalties of effort. And I actually consider offside to be penalties of effort because you're trying to, you anticipate the snap count and do all that kind of stuff. Holding is penalties. You can call holding on any play. It's just a matter of if you get caught. But looking back on it, initially my reaction at the game was, man, this defense is like really bad on the penalties. And then I look back and I'm like, actually, there was that one sequence where I think they committed 3 straight penalties and almost 4 straight, but then an interference call got picked up. So I didn't think it was. Looking back on it, I don't think it was as egregious. It may have seemed at the time, but it wasn't as egregious as perhaps it may have been.
And keep in mind, if a defensive side of the ball for them is going to be on for a lot of snaps, well, guess what? Penalties are going to come. I mean, I don't care who you are. If you're on the field for a lot of time, you're going to have a lot of snaps, which means your defense could get a little worn down. You make a couple of penalties. And the other thing is, you might give up some points. I mean, I'm not alarmed by 23 points. The way this style of play is with the offense going as fast as they are, you're going to give up points.
Yeah.
It's really more about, and people have done the research now the last few years since we've seen more and more of these spread offenses. What is the points per possession? I think that's really more where you could tell if the defense is struggling or not, because the more and more, possessions they're in the game, you're more frequent to give up more yardage and play. So I don't get too caught up in that either. Like I said, and if anything, I think it's a good, better get it out of the way now than when games mattered later in the year.
Well, if you're going to work out some of those kinks, it might be a good idea to do it against ECU at home in your next game, because let's compare the numbers, shall we? Right now, UCF is, after the 51 that they threw on Cincinnati in, again, 15 minutes and 49 seconds of possession and 40 plays. It's almost 12 yards of play that we were putting up. Knights are, tops in the American in scoring at 47.5 a game, and they're tops in the American in scoring defense at giving up just 15.8 a game. On the other side of the ledger, you have the Purple Pirates, who are averaging just 22.2 points per game on offense. That's next to last in the league. And they are giving up 47.8 on defense, dead last in the American. They are 10th in total offense. They are dead last in total defense. They are dead last in rushing offense. They are next to dead last in rushing defense. They're just the passing offense not that bad. They're 5th, but second to last in pass. Their defense is just its existence is questionable. So, I'm looking at this, and if I'm Scott Frost and Troy Walters and Mario Verduzco and the players, I can't wait until Saturday to get out on the field against East Carolina. Is there any... Now, UCF comes into this game, this is according to OddsShark, a 35-point favorite at home. 35.
How much?
35.
That was at 33.5, I think, to start the week. So.
I'm looking at it. It opened at 28.
Oh.
It's been bet up to 35. And what else is the other thing that they... over under 73.5, which is actually, for a 35-point spread, is a fairly low over-under, which tells me that Vegas thinks this is going to be an absolute wipeout. My question is, any potential for overconfidence? This is still a conference game at home. Knights are coming in undefeated. You're staring at 1-5 East Carolina up there. You got Navy coming up in that big showdown. They're ranked 2. I know that Scott Frost and the players this week have been saying, look, we're not overlooking ECU. They're a conference opponent. You never know what you're going to get from them. But God. I mean, how hard is it to stay within yourself when you're looking at those kinds of numbers in the scouting report?
Well, I'm the wrong guy to ask. I'm the guy that wrote this week about whether College Game Day is going to be at the next week's game. So,
oh, yeah, you are looking ahead, aren't you?
Darn right I am. So I think that answers your question. No, I don't think there's any worry. In fact, it's funny.
Man, I hope you're right.
We've been talking about, how this team doesn't have a bye week now because, they filled out their bye week with the Austin Peay game. Well, I would argue this could be like a de facto bye week because if UCF, I think, comes out ready to play, I think this will be a quick game, and I think you'll see a lot of players play, and I think that's the goal. I think they're locked in, focused, and it's really a bad matchup for East Carolina. I mean, and maybe if the game was in Greenville, I could say it might be a more trickier game, but not at home, not at night.
Yeah, the kickoff for the game is set for it's a nighttime game. Homecoming, obviously, for UCF coming in, and everything that has to do with that. Elsewhere around the American, by the way, as I'm taking a look around, Temple is at UConn, Memphis is at Navy, so that should be really interesting. And you mentioned it in your piece, which you can find on blackandgoldbanneret.com, about could ESPN College Game Day go live from UCF versus Navy? Well, Memphis, who, by the way, their lone loss on the season is to UCF, is home for Navy, I should say. UConn is at Temple. Tulsa's home for Houston. Tulane is out of conference. They've got Florida International and Butch Davis, who, if I'm not mistaken, is also undefeated aside from UCF. Cincinnati's at USF. So you got some interesting matchups right now in the conference as we're heading into the thick of the conference season. Navy right now undefeated at 5-0, 3-0 in the league. USF, of course, 5-0, 2-0, and we're 4-0, 2-0. And there's your three ranked teams. Houston 2-0 in the league, 4-1, and then of course Memphis, who's Riley. Believe it or not, Riley Ferguson actually was named Conference Player of the Week, even despite Mackenzie Milton's numbers. He threw seven touchdowns last week.
Thank you. Wait, why is? Yeah, I saw where some people were upset that Milton didn't get Player of the Week. Like, duh. Like, if I threw 7 touchdowns and tied the conference record, I would hope he would get the Player of the Week. I was kind of surprised that people were thrown off by that. Like, of course, Riley.
Milton did it in 3 quarters. I think that was kind of the thing that got everyone's feathers ruffled.
I would argue that Mackenzie Milton would not even be my choice for Player of the Week for UCF if you were going to give it to a night player. I would have given it to Traquan Smith, and I'm not just saying that because he led us to a 4-0 record in our fantasy picks. How that tastes, Nightline. You clowns. What did you get yourselves into? Did you hear, by the way, Fagley wants to tap out. He's already quit. He's trying to quit. He wants out, and I don't blame him. I mean, he's over. I mean, clearly they're over their heads here. We're the masters. They're not. And they're very overwhelmed, and he's trying to tap out.
I'm keeping my mouth shut. We still got 7 games to go here. Never count your chickens before they've had.
No, and I give Trace credit. He's not budging. He's not giving up, and I don't blame him. He shouldn't give it up at all. But right now we're 2 wins away from bowl eligibility and 3 wins from locking it up. That's the way I'm looking at it. But
all right.
No, I think Traquan Smith. I would have given it to Traquan. I think would be your better argument. Who was phenomenal. They're both phenomenal, but I would have, if you were going to give it to one from UCF, I would have gone Traquan Smith. I mean, he was just a force. So, but Mackenzie played well, and that's a good sign. It's a good thing that we're talking about Mackenzie at a high level like that. That's very significant. And I think that's the problem with East Carolina is here's the problem East Carolina's got. I think UCF could play a C game, a C- game on Saturday and still win this going away.
I don't want to get too cocky, but God, it's like I'm trying to figure out like how does East Carolina stay competitive in this game? Even if UCF plays poorly. I mean, obviously, God forbid, someone gets hurt. I mean, but UCF right now is averaging 8 yards a play.
The argument you can make is that East Carolina hung in there with USF. When they played earlier this season. That was a shootout. It was a tight, back and forth game for a little while. USF eventually pulled away. But the problem is that game was in Greenville.
Right.
This game is not. And I think when you have 18 to 22-year-olds, you could have some lapses. I think the real answer is UCF turning the football over. That's really the way East Carolina could pull this off, is if UCF turns the ball over, gives East Carolina a short field, gets off to a good start.
Yeah,
maybe
gets
UCF
down early, and yeah.
It's a lot of things. Basically, UCF has to help East Carolina. I don't think if this game is straight up that East Carolina has a shot. I mean, they have their issues. I was in Greenville during the softball tournament talking to people in the area, and they acknowledged that this was going to be a tough year. They're still in rebuilding mode over there. And what's interesting over there, I mean, they're a proud football program and a proud fan base.
As they should be.
But as you've noticed, their attendance has dropped, and that is significant financially for that school. That school needs that stadium to be full for them to do well. And there's some rumblings whether Scotty Montgomery lasts after this season. I don't know what's going to happen with that. I don't follow them closely enough, but there's certainly a lot of frustration over there. And certainly, I don't know if they can turn it around this year or not. So they're going to try to this year, but I just think this is a bad week for them and a bad matchup.
Yeah. My hope is, again, like we did last week, I had my reservations, but it's like, look, jump on them early and do not let up. Just keep plugging. Go up 28-0 in the first quarter. I don't care. Right now, the offensive rankings for UCF: number 1 scoring offense in the country, number 2 in passing efficiency, number 8 in total offense. This is in the country. 25th in rushing, 18th in passing, 27th in total defense, 9th in rushing defense, 11th in scoring defense, 27th in pass efficiency defense, 2nd in turnover margin. So this is the Scott. Oh, by the way, and I think this is interesting. Some of these defensive numbers some of them are middle of the road, like we're 88th in passing yards allowed. But here's what I think is an interesting one. We are 11th in first down defense. 11th in first downs given up. Now that, to me, is an interesting number. That's the bend but don't break philosophy, right?
Yeah.
We might give up some yardage, but eventually we're gonna put a stop to you, and we're gonna turn the ball over on you. So I think that, like I said, Coach Chenander deserves a tremendous amount of credit, and I just hope that UCF fans just sit back and take this in, take in what is happening with this team. Because it's rare that you see that you see performances on both sides of the ball like this that are this consistent, right? And this spectacular. Just sit back and enjoy it, because it is really something to watch right now. So, again, looking at it now, you had mentioned, and before we go, I want to get into this. UCF right now, 21st in the coaches, 22nd in the AP.
Mm-hmm.
East Carolina this week, 7 o'clock. By the way, this is on CBS Sports Network, this game. Assuming UCF takes care of business against ECU, they head up to Annapolis and play Navy. That game is also scheduled for CBS Sports Network next Saturday at 3:30.
Right.
Assuming also Navy gets through Memphis, you got your piece up there about could ESPN College Game Day go live from UCF versus Navy. A lot of people out there reacted to it saying, oh, come on, they're not going to go live from a non-ESPN game, which is probably the best argument. But let's clarify for everybody out there, that has not stopped ESPN from going live from a non-ESPN game.
Yeah.
They've done it. They've done it before at. I know they've done it before for Auburn, Alabama, and a few other SEC matchups with CBS. They did it last week. That's right.
They did it for TCU West Virginia, which is an FS1 game. That was last week. They're in James Madison this weekend. This just in. James Madison, not an ESPN game right now. So
right.
That was fascinating that a lot of people had that negative perception. And to be honest, if I'm College Game Day and leave that would be a little concerning. That's the perception out there, that you're not going to go to the best games. You're just going to the ESPN games. which I know they have fought. They have fought that. And look, I mean, and part of it is ESPN has a lot of games. So the percentages are you're going to pick an ESPN game. And as I broke that down in the story, I think, yes, Penn State, Michigan, which is the ABC primetime game that Saturday, which I think you would agree is become the marquee now slot in college football. It used to be CBS at 3:30 was the marquee slot. But to me, because that was the SEC, and then back when we were kids, it was that 3:30 game on ABC. Keith Jackson, Bob Greasy, that was the big game, right? Right. But now the way the sport has gone, everybody wants to play at night and everything, and that ABC Saturday night franchise, which they have started, I think it's been now going on 10 to 11 seasons. That's become most of the time it's the most watched game of the weekend. There obviously are exceptions, but so obviously, yes, they would try to go there. Part of it is to make life easier on Kurt Herbstreit, who has to do game day and then do that Saturday night game. So obviously, if they're in different cities, he's got to fly out to the next game. Like, for example, this weekend, I believe they're in James Madison. After that, he's going to fly out to Tuscaloosa to call the Alabama-Arkansas game with Fowler. And I think a part of that is because I don't think they want him to go West Coast to that USC-Utah game, which is on ABC, because it's a long flight and it's kind of touch and go from a timing standpoint. And they clearly wouldn't have time to go to the Oklahoma-Texas game, which is a 3:30 kick on ESPN. So, they try to pick a game that's a marquee game that picks them. But look, they've done these type of games before. And again, I for the record, I'm not saying that they're going to go to UCF Navy. I'm just saying there's a chance. Yeah. That's all I said. I mean, even the story, I still make Michigan Penn State the favorite. What I basically made the argument for is with Michigan losing, and not only losing, but they look terrible. If you watched them against Michigan State turning the ball over 5 times in the loss, it was pretty bad. Honestly, I think they're going to get crushed by Penn State. So what I made the case is I think Michigan losing opens the door a little bit. And by the way, Michigan's got to play at Indiana this weekend. Who's to say they don't get upset by Indiana the way they're playing? And if they get upset, that's 2 losses. I mean, Indiana can move the ball. It is Indiana. I'm not saying I would bet on it. I'm just saying they can move the ball. So all I did was, what are the contenders for game day? Because I have been to a number of game days. I have been in fact, the most recent game day I was at was 4 years ago with Miami played Florida State, and I had access to game day as far as what it was like. And I know how they think. And it's not like, hey, which one's the ABC game next week? All right, we're going there. They do have a process of going through the games and thinking what's the best, location to go, what's the best game, storylines, etc. You may not agree with them on some of their decisions, but they do go through the process. So that's what I did. I went through the process and said, look, if UCF and Navy, both in the top 25, both win this weekend, both are undefeated, I think they'll give it a look. They've never been to Annapolis, and and game day likes to do that. They like to cross off a city or a campus, whatever, they haven't been to. They've teased
Navy
Pullman,
would be
Washington.
A good place to go.
Correct. I mean, Air Force has hosted game day 3 times. Army's hosted on campus. Navy's never hosted in Annapolis. So this might be their best shot to go there if they want to do it. Now, then obviously there's a security question, whether, with obviously the naval base and everything, can you host game day and stuff like that? There's some logistics possibly that could be a question. And look, as I said in the story, if Navy loses to Memphis, it's a moot point. Then I think it's done. But if Navy wins and UCF wins, I think they get consideration. And I think for people to dismiss that I was kind of surprised by that. Maybe those are the same people that don't go to home games.
Well, I think you gave Michigan Penn State a 50% chance if Michigan wins on Saturday. If UCF and Navy are undefeated coming into that Saturday, you gave it a 40% chance. If UCF or Navy lose on Saturday, that bumps down to 0. So USC Notre Dame 5%, and then you said best of the rest, 5%. Possibly Pullman for Washington State. I know that they would want to go there eventually, especially if the Mike Leach thing continues to work up there in Pullman. So that should be an interesting thing. Well, one thing that they could definitely profile, aside from, of course, Navy and all the tradition that we know that's up there. We know a few night folks are going to be heading up there. I know you're going to be heading up there to Annapolis.
That's the plan.
I know that one thing that I'm that we're probably going to hear a lot of heading into that game, regardless, is Scott Frost and UCF's offense. And I wrote about that this week on blackandgoldbanneret.com. That and I looked at the numbers, and we are on pace to rewrite a number of school offensive records this year. Team offense, we are on pace to beat school records in points per game, total points, total yards a game, yards per play, and touchdowns. All on pace to beat them. We're on pace to get a solid. This is what I thought was amazing. Rushing, okay. We're on pace to get a solid second place all time at UCF in total rushing yards for the season. Right now we're on pace for about 2,667 yards a game, yards for the season, total rushing. Now, 2007, the Kevin Smith year, you're just not going to touch that. That was 3,287. That was 3,200 yards rushing, almost 3,300 in one season. But second place was 2010. We got about 2,600 yards. We're on pace to beat that. We are on pace to set a new yards per rush record. We're on pace for a solid second in rush yards per game at 222.3. And we're on pace to tie the third best total for rushing touchdowns. Again, those are the rushing numbers that are competitive or right up there with take out the Kevin Smith year, and this year's team's right at the top of rushing. Then we go into passing, right? Chance for a all-time passing record for total passing yards. The record's 38-37 back in 2002. Pass yards a game, we're on pace for third all-time in school history. On pace for records on yards per attempt and passing touchdowns. Mackenzie Milton is ready to rewrite the record books on yards per pass, yards per completion, touchdown passes, passer rating. Pretty close. He's set up for fourth all-time completion percentage in passing yards. Traquan Smith is on pace to set new records. Adrian Killens is on pace to break his own yards per rush record. This team is almost an outlier. That's how good they have been offensively. I mean, and this got me thinking. And we'll do this before we get to the break, Eric. So the teams that kept popping up in terms of the great offensive teams for UCF, obviously 2007, the Kevin Smith year. 2002, which was the Ryan Schneider year. Where he set all kinds of UCF passing records, and 1998, which was Dante Culpepper's senior year. Of those three teams, which offense do you take?
Whoa. Different times, right? I mean, they're completely different offenses. So, the Kevin Smith one, that's a one-man show, with all due respect to Kyle and, the passing game. That was a one-man show. Culpepper was fantastic, but again, you could argue he kind of made that offense go.
Speaking of one-man shows.
Yeah. And, I know Brian Murphy brought this up last week when I listened. I think he was, and you can correct me if I was wrong. I don't want to make it sound like he said something he didn't. But I got the impression that he thinks this team is better than 2013 as a whole. Because when you think of an offense, I think that offense with Blake at quarterback, with Storm running the football, you had Stanback, the receivers that they had, that offense was just as good as any. Now, again,
it was a very well-rounded offense, and they weren't a record-smashing offense for UCF.
It's a completely different offense, though. It was a pro set offense. They didn't go no huddle. They didn't go fast. Remember, this offense has more possessions, more plays because they're going faster. So it's hard to compare those offenses to those previous offenses, the 0-2 offenses and so forth. because they're completely different styles, different times, and everything like that. I just found it interesting that Murph said that last week. I'm not ready to go there as far as the 2013 team yet. But look, I mean, I think there's certainly a possibility that you can look back and say that this offense might be one of the, if not the best offense UCF's ever had. And I think the telling sign will be obviously how they finish this year, how they go. And then how many of these guys, end up being successful elsewhere? Like I think Traquan Smith is a future NFL guy. Certainly some of those running backs are talented. Who knows what the future holds for those guys here at UCF and beyond. The offensive line has only given up 1 sack to this point. So certainly there's cases to be it's there. But again, there's still a lot of football to go. And keep in mind, some of these, the schedules are different. Like I'll give you an example. Like, the 99 UCF team, for example, they opened the season playing Purdue with Drew Brees. They played at Georgia Tech. They played at Georgia. They played, at Florida. So it's not, you're not going to put up big numbers playing those teams. You look at, for example, the 02 UCF team you were talking about. That was a pretty good one.
That team lost, but that team went 7-5, but 4 of their 5 losses were by 5 points or less. 3 of them were by a field goal.
They beat Ben Roethlisberger in Miami of Ohio to end the season there. In Miami of Ohio.
Yep, young Ben Roethlisberger too. And their losses on the year, they lost at home to Syracuse 38-35 in a game that they had a lead. They lost at home to Toledo 27-24 in a game where they also had a lead. They had 4 possessions to beat Marshall on ESPN2 on a Friday night. Couldn't get it done in Huntington. And the other close loss, we got blown out by Arizona State and Phoenix. But the other one was in the season opener at Penn State, then ranked number 23. In a game where actually Penn State actually dominated the game, but then we scored, I think, 2 late touchdowns to get it within 3.
Tough schedule, though. There's some, Syracuse, Penn State. So I mean,
first year in the MAC.
Yeah, first year in the MAC. So there are apples and oranges, different times in the program. I want to wait and see what happens here. The good news is, I don't think there's anybody on the schedule that will be able to slow down UCF. Maybe until USF, maybe the bowl game. So they're going to still, I think, unless UCF, I think UCF's biggest nemesis will be UCF from here on, from an offensive standpoint. And I think that's, you're right. I mean, they have the ability to rack up numbers and certainly be in the conversation and certainly be right up there.
Yeah, well, I mean, those are things that we're going to be following, throughout the year. Do the numbers fall for Dante Culpepper, Ryan Schneider, and Darren Hinshaw? Bernard Ford, Brett Cooper, some of those guys with Traquan Smith chasing after them. If things continue at this pace, this team could be a real all-timer for UCF. So again, playing East Carolina, homecoming, 7 o'clock game on CBS Sports Network.
How many people were getting there? For the, what is it, space? What's the theme here?
It's the space game. I love the helmet, by the way. This is my wheelhouse, baby. I love it. I love the helmets. I kind of wish we did a little bit more with the uniforms themselves, but I get it. But you could really go all out with that if you really wanted to, and kind of make them make our uniforms look like Saturn V's if we wanted to. But I love the helmets. I really do love the helmets. And did you notice the little jab at USF?
No, I don't. No, pull me in on this one.
Okay, so the helmet stripe. All right, you're gonna like this. The helmet stripe has these. It's got pictures of constellations on it. It's like a picture of the nighttime sky with constellations, and there's a few constellations that are on the stripe. One of them is, of course, Pegasus. That's one constellation. One of them is Orion the Hunter. One of them is the constellation Corona Borealis, the crown. Okay, so we have Orion the hunter, a crown, a horse, and the bull, Taurus the bull. And on the website, it says, it mentions, all right, here's the constellations on the stripe, and it says the bull, the victim of Orion's strike. Taurus represents the opponent and the conquered. Not so subtle jab at USF right there.
Ah, see, that stuff goes over my head, so I'm glad you figured that out.
I didn't figure it out. They had that right there on the website. We have looked at, but I was like, yeah, okay. By the way, there's also the twins, Gemini, and the sextants used by astronomers to measure the position of the stars. But still, that's not very subtle.
Well, I'm working at the USF campus this weekend, so I'm playing nice this weekend. So I'll defer to you guys on that. But that's good. Boy. That's creative. It's fine with me. We'll see how many people come out, and should be interesting to see what the homecoming crowd will be like. And
homecoming should be a big event. I'm expecting a very good crowd. I don't know if we'll sell out, but I think we'll get close. I think it'll be the biggest crowd of the year to this point.
You have a number?
Let's see here. Let me pull up I'm gonna go 40,000.
40,000.
Yep.
Makes sense, right? Homecoming. A lot of people make plans for homecoming weekend. Just for fun, I will take the under into 40,000.
Under 40,000.
Yeah, I'm curious to see.
All right.
There's some reasons for it. I mean, East Carolina's not very good. I think that's going to it'll be interesting. It's going to be interesting to me, and I've said this, and people don't like when I say this, but historically, when UCF is playing at the same time as a Florida game, it affects the attendance a little bit. It's affected them when they have had home games against Florida, Georgia. This weekend, Florida's hosting A&M. Same time, it's a night game. I think some people will just kind of either go to that, or some people will just stay home and watch all of it, which, look, television and HD and streaming and bars, that's a factor, too, in the entertainment dollar. So hopefully you're right, and you can laugh at me next week. But I'm going to say 36.
Oh, man. Boy.
People's heads will just blow up if that happens.
Oh, boy. Oh, man. I'm going for 40 just based on the draw for homecoming. And also the hype with this team, now 21st in the country, the offense, the whole thing. It's like now I feel like the momentum is starting to pick up now. So we got a real winner, and this should be, and hopefully we'll continue to have a real winner here against ECU. All right, we're going to take a quick break. We come back. We got a little bit more to talk about. All the other sports as well, women's soccer, men's soccer. We'll catch up on volleyball after this past weekend, and we will catch up on, and we'll catch you up on everything else. Stick around. Black and Gold Banneret Podcast back after this.
Hello, Night Nation. I'm Andrew Fegley.
And I'm Trey Strelko. Where are we? This isn't our usual spot.
It looks like we've landed in the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast.
Oh, yeah. I've heard of those guys.
Nightline has UCF sports covered.
Week in and week out, we bring you interviews with newsmakers and in-depth analysis of UCF sports.
Subscribe to our weekly podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Be sure to subscribe to Nightline on YouTube, like us on Facebook, and follow us on Twitter at UCF_Nightline.
Trace, can we go back to the 1148 studios now and start working on our next all-new Nightline?
How do we get out of here? Go Knights!
Charge on.
Now back to you guys in the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast.
All right, welcome back to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Jeff Sharon, Eric Lopez with you. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at UCF_Banneret. We're going to have another live blog of the homecoming game this coming Saturday, UCF against ECU. And we will also have, you can also follow me on Twitter at Jeff_Sharon. Follow Eric at Eric Lopez Elo. We're also on Facebook. Follow us there. Give us a like at Black and Gold Banneret, and hop on blackandgoldbanneret.com where we have where we've been stepping up the content for you guys all throughout the year. Huge thanks once again to Brian Murphy, who's just been who's just been a total ace this year. And in terms of the previews, the press conferences, everything, it's just been. Boy, it's been awesome. And thanks again to him for filling in for you, Eric, last week.
Did a great job. I mean,
great.
I thought I was going to get Drew Bledsoe and just got to be replaced by Tom Brady.
Pipped?
Yeah, I went with the more modern era. I don't know how many people in our audience know who Wally Pipp is, unfortunately, at this point. But
give me a break with that.
I'm just saying. By the way, did I hear Andrew there and Trace? Did I just hear them there a little bit?
Yeah, you did.
How many wins they have this year?
That would be 0. They have they are still behind. Boy, you're just not going to let them. You're not. Okay, listen. Don't be that guy. Don't be that guy. Let's behave gracefully.
Did we ever figure out what we're doing for dinner? Did we ever figure that out? Because they're making liners about steak and shake and stuff. I assumed that we would eat. I assumed we would just eat at Burger U, which is where they do their post game shows after home games, which is great. I actually recommend that. I mean, I'm joking a lot, but they do a great job with that. With the post game shows,
I love the post game show. It's become like go to content for me.
So wow, there you go. So I was just assuming that they could just buy us dinner at Burger U at the end of the year when we lock when we recap the season, something like that, or after a basketball game. I thought that was kind of the idea there because they do have that's kind of been the place to go now. I think for UCF fans, obviously the coaches shows are there. That's another option we could do. We could do it. They could pay us off at a coach's show, maybe a Johnny Dawkins show or something like that. Who knows? They should start thinking about that. Save your money, guys. Save your money because it's coming.
Look, we're not gonna make him do Ruth's Chris as much as we would like to. We're fair. We're fair-minded individuals. And,
I will say this. I mean, if we do this for basketball, Trace has got a lot of experience in this. He did this. He's been doing this for years in basketball, so I will warn you about that.
Oh boy.
That's how I got the idea. I've sat with him with everything on the line at basketball games. It's intense. It's very intense.
I'll leave that alone between you guys for basketball season. I just like our winning streak here with football. So, all right, let's catch you up on everything else that's going on around UCF sports right now. Women's soccer, they just keep rolling, man. 9-1-1, 5-0-1 in conference. They've won 5 in a row. They are unbeaten since the opener, which was at number 4 South Carolina. They're just smashing people right now. This is really something to watch. Last weekend, last Thursday rather, they beat Houston 4-0 at Houston, then drove down to Dallas and beat SMU 4-0. In 6 conference games so far, Tiffany Roberts-Sahedak's team is, and I'm doing the math in my head right here, 13 and 20. They've outscored their opponents 23-1 in 6 conference games. Amazing. Right now, like I said, they're 9-1-1. Look at the rankings. In the women's soccer RPI, they are 7th. They've actually dropped a little bit in the RPI. In the United Soccer Coaches rankings, they are up to 8th. They moved up another 2 spots in the polls. So they're 8th behind West Virginia, just ahead of Texas. Florida, by the way, is 10th. Stanford is number 1, followed by UCLA and South Carolina at 3. South Carolina, who beat us 2-0. North Carolina, who we beat in overtime, is 5th. So, yeah, UCF women's soccer, man, they just get this team just continues to roll. I'm looking at the stats right now, and I wanted to bring this up because it's just been an amazing performance this year from Vera Varis in goal. She's gotten some help from Chloe Ngazi here and there as well. But Morgan Ferrara is just having an amazing year, 11 goals. And she's been picked up by Kayla Adamek and the newcomer Dina Orshman. And, man, it's just all coming together for Tiffany Roberts-Sahadak and company.
They're a machine. You pointed out that they dropped in the RPI, which might sound crazy considering how they dominated this weekend. But this is the flaw that a lot of people and the criticism that a lot of people have with the RPI. And that is, if you're playing teams that don't have a very good RPI, you could beat them 10-0 and you're still going to drop a spot or two. If you lose, it's catastrophic. And that's the concern that I have. That's the one concern I have about UCF moving, as we move forward, And I've had this argument, and I've screamed about it in softball, and but it's the case in every sport. I know Todd. I've spoken to Todd about this at volleyball. It's the same. It's even a bigger problem in volleyball, as we'll get into later. You almost get punished for games that you have no control over. Like, you have to play your conference games, and if certain teams in your conference aren't very good, you still have to play them. I mean, what's so laughable about the RPI, it's like 2 years ago, and we've joked this, UCF got snowed out in softball playing Connecticut, which actually helped them in the RPI because that was 2 less games they had to play against Connecticut. If they would have played those 2 games, and swept them, they would have won a share of the regular season title, but they would have been hurt in the RPI. That's how ludicrous it is.
Right.
That's why I think it's interesting, and I don't know, people have kind of gone under the radar in this. They're playing at LSU this Sunday, and the LSU RPI is 27. So for those that forget, LSU was supposed to come to UCF this year. They were supposed to play earlier this year in September, but that was on that Friday before Irma. If you remember, that was the same day that UCF Memphis got moved to and got canceled. So they canceled the UCF LSU game. Well, LSU was here. They were here in Orlando. So one of the reasons why, as I understand it, the game was in Baton Rouge this time, because some people have asked me about that. Why is this game in Baton Rouge, not back in Orlando, like it was originally scheduled? Well, part of it is because LSU was already here, and we've talked about this last week and in previous episodes, Jeff. With Olympic sports, there's budget questions. It's not as simple as, hey, just get on a plane there and we'll just come back there. Well, you got to reschedule flights.
And it's not like you can just, ring up the ATM and poof, you're in Baton Rouge,
Right. So that's part of the deal there. And so plus LSU is home this weekend for conference. So they just decided, you know what, let's just go there. Because I think UCF wants to play this game. And so, you know what, we're going to go to LSU. We're going to play that game. And you know what? From an RPI standpoint, it's the smart decision by Coach Sahedek. Why? Because you get rewarded more by playing on the road anyway.
Right.
So, and LSU's RPI is 27 from the SEC. So let's say UCF can get a result there and win. Now your RPI stays up there. And that's my big concern, because you look at the rest of the schedule, and I know you're going to have it you're going to mention it here in a moment. There's going to be some games that they're not great RPI teams that they got coming up here that could hurt them. And I think that's important, because right now UCF being ranked in the 8th in the polls, they're in the top 10 in the RPI. That's very important. Chris Henderson, who we've had on the show, and we're definitely going to have him on again, probably on the week of the conference tournament like we did last year, covers women's soccer and as good as anybody, does his projections. He currently has UCF as a number 2 seed. Now, soccer is a little different than the other sports in that they don't seed the teams, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, like the other sports. What they do is they break them down into top 2 seeds in each region. Mm-hmm. And why that's important, if you're a top 2 seed, okay, like right now UCF's a 2 seed. What that means is UCF could host every NCAA tournament game up until the Elite Eight. If you're a 1 seed, you host every NCAA tournament game up until to the College Cup, which obviously will be where again? Oh, that's right.
Right here.
Orlando.
Yep.
So if you're a 3 seed, for example, then that's different. As a 3 seed, you get to host probably if you're not a top 2 seed, you got to go to that 2 seed spot, for example. So that's significant. If you're UCF, you're hoping to play yourself into a 1 seed. If you play yourself into a 1 seed, now all of a sudden you're playing all of your games in the postseason in Orlando. If you're a 2 seed, you may have to go on the road for an Elite Eight matchup. If you're dropped to a 3 seed, now all of a sudden you may have to go to and we've seen this the last decade, Jeff, with UCF teams. They've had to go to Florida, or they've had to go to different locations for a weekend to get out of there, in advance of the Elite Eight. So that's something to monitor. And so that's why it's important for UCF to maintain that high RPI, try to stay in that top 8 RPI if you can, and then obviously keep winning. Obviously, it's the basic stuff. But if you're UCF, you're trying to, stack it up to where you're a 1 seed or a 2 seed, so teams come to you instead of you having to travel to a Florida or Florida State, or how about this scenario, playing UCLA?
Yeah. Oh, boy. Wouldn't that be something?
Oh, oh boy. Yeah. So that's why I think the LSU game is big from that standpoint, Jeff, because if they can pull off a win on the road there, that's a top 30 RPI win. That will help their RPI, and that's significant moving forward because that's important. Let's be honest. It's easier to be at home. Now, UCF's going to host the opening round, and hopefully at the track they're going, they'll get to host. And the way the soccer tournament works, it's a little different than the other sports as well. The top 32 teams get to host the first round. So the first round, it's at the home sites, regardless. Mm-hmm. Then the second weekend, it's the second round and the third round will be hosted by the team that's a high seed. So, for example, UCF, if they're a 2 seed, they would host that round, which is obviously the second round in the Sweet 16. And then if UCF is still a 2 seed, they probably would have to go on the road in the Elite 8 unless the 1 seed that's in their bracket gets knocked off.
Right.
That's why it's so important, and that's the tricky part. I mean, I know our friend Amanda Cromwell, last year UCLA got to the Elite 8, but they had to go to West Virginia. And you know what happened in December in Morgantown, Jeff? It snowed.
Right.
Guess who won?
West Virginia.
Who ended up winning. Yeah. So that's why these matches are very critical because I think this UCF team, Jeff, has a chance. We talked about in the last segment about how this football offense and how good this offense for UCF is as good as maybe any offense we've seen from UCF soccer in a long time. And that's saying something. This team has a chance, is very special, and they've got a lot of chances to do a lot of great things. They're just trying to put themselves in that position. And that's why this LSU match is huge, and obviously finishing strong is big. And, it's a bye week. And it's important because there's really the American Conference race has turned into a 3-team race. It's them, Cincinnati, and USF. And remember this, the regular season, UCF ends it hosting
USF. Yep.
Yeah.
One little interesting tidbit that I actually that was brought up on Twitter, Top Drawer Soccer, which kind of does some independent rankings. Garrett Weiss on Twitter actually sent this over to me, and so thanks to Garrett. He's been following UCF women's soccer. Last week, Top Drawer Soccer had UCF as 21st in the country. This week, with the 2 wins in Texas, Top Drawer moved UCF up to 9th. So, all of a sudden, it seems like Top Drawer Soccer started paying closer attention to UCF real quick, and I think the nation's paying closer attention to UCF women's soccer right now because of that offense. I'm so glad you made that point about LSU. That's a top 30 RPI game on the road. You get bonus points for the road, like you said. Then you got UConn. Then that's the last road game of the year, by the way, before the postseason. So, then your last 3 games of the year are home for UConn, home for Temple, who are, middle of the road in the American.
Well, here's my point.
2-2, Temple's 1-2-1, and then you finish up with USF, who is 9-3. 5-1 in the league, just behind UCF, and they're 28 RPI. So,
right.
so that's 2 out of your last 4 against RPI top 30s.
That's huge, and that's why they needed to get this LSU match in. UConn, for example, 145 RPI. That doesn't help you. That hurts, and there's nothing UCF can do about it. That's a conference game. You have to play it.
Temple, by the way, 208 RPI.
Correct. Absolutely, and that's a concern. And it's the flaw.
They're 13 spots behind Fairleigh Dickinson.
That's the flaw with the RPI. That's why I have a problem. It's not just a soccer problem. It's on every sport. I mean, you bring this up to Todd Dagenet, he'll get going on this, and I agree with him 100%. And it's my frustration in softball. That's why I think the committee can't just base everything on RPI. There has to be an eye test, and that's my frustration with committees, and that's why I'm always cynical. It's like don't just go based on RPI because that's just part of the story. Look at the team. Are they one of the 8 best teams in the country? Are they one of the 4 best teams in the country? Are they one of the 16 best teams in the country? There should be very different variables that have to take into place. And the RPI doesn't do that. I'm not saying it's a bad tool to have, but you just said it right there. That's why it was important that UCF get that LSU match on the schedule, because they're going to drop in the RPI when they play Connecticut, fair or not. That's going to happen. Even if they win 20-0, doesn't matter. The RPI doesn't take scoring margins into play. I know some people have suggested maybe doing that. I don't know about all that, but
I got a little worried about that. But anyway,
but yeah, so that's the problem. That's why that was big, that they can get that LSU match in, and it's a big match because you're right. They have LSU and USF, so at least you got 2 more marquee games to balance out with Connecticut and Temple. So you hope that the goal is to maintain that high RPI to give yourself a chance when the committee to be a high seed, maybe a 1 seed or a 2 seed. That's the key. And that way, hopefully, not have to take a flight or a long bus trip out of Central Florida.
Yeah.
If things break right. So big match on Sunday, big match, and credit to Coach Sahedek and the staff for playing this game at LSU, because I know there's some people that might say, watch, I'm not going to go to your place. Forget it. No, she's looking out for the best interest of her team. There's confidence in their own team, and they want to play the best no matter where it is. And I got to salute them for that.
Yeah, I love it when no matter what sport, when the coaches are like, we'll play anyone, anywhere. Bring it on. I just love that. So UCF right now, like we said, 9-1-1 overall, number 8 in the country, 16 points.
Number 8.
Yeah.
Isn't that remarkable? I think we've lost. This was a team that missed the NCAA tournament last year. And let's be honest, was questions about this year. They weren't picked very high in the conference going into the season. Not that you read into that, but there was questions going into the season on how good this team would be. And now who would have thought they'd be ranked 8th in the country? This is big for Coach Sahedek, Jeff. Mm-hmm. Don't you agree? Because, and we both like Coach Sahedek, but there was that question. And when you're following a great coach, there's always going to be this question. When you're following someone like Cromwell, people wonder, and she won right away in 2014, but the thought was, well, she won with Cromwell's players, but can she recruit? Can she? Well, I think this year has proven that answer.
Yeah, she's pretty much answered that pretty definitively. I'll say that.
Should be in consideration for National Coach of the Year.
Oh, no question. No question.
Okay.
No question. So we'll see how that works out against LSU as they, again, that's October the 15th. That's this coming Sunday at 2 p.m. No TV for that game, unfortunately, but at Baton Rouge. So keep an eye out on that one on Sunday, 2 p.m. So, all right, flip over to men's soccer. They are actually unbeaten in their last 2. They got the win against Stetson, and then at home, tied Memphis, 1-1. They've got a match Sunday at noon at home against Tulsa. Here's the story for UCF men's soccer. We got to keep an eye on the standings here. UCF right now, like we said, only has, right now, only 1 point so far. Because remember, this is an abbreviated conference schedule. You only have 8 teams that play soccer in the American. So you're playing 7 conference games. The Knights are 0-2-1 in the conference. Not off to the best start. I mean, what can we say about not having a home game until the middle of October, or at the beginning of October, I should say. But here's where you can catch up. You got Tulsa coming in at home on Sunday, and Tulsa, by the way, 1-2. So if you get 3 points there, okay, now you're at 4. You got UConn coming up. Now, UConn's undefeated. They're 3-0, 6-3-2 overall. You're playing them on the road. That's going to be a tough game on Saturday, October 21st. Tuesday, you got a Tuesday night at home against FAU. Then you're home for Temple and at Cincinnati to finish out. Okay? So if you're home for Temple's 1-2. That's a winnable game. And you're at Cincinnati. They haven't won a game yet. So three of your conference games, I think, are winnable. And if you can steal a draw against UConn and win those 3 games, doing the math in my head, that's 10 points that you're going to add to your total. 11 points, I think, Eric, could get UCF into the semis for the conference championship, which is a 4-team tournament essentially. So again, that's something that we're going to have to keep an eye on as UCF heads down the stretch against, like we said, Tulsa on Sunday, coming off that draw against Memphis. Tough break not getting the win. It was Andreas Steiniger who had who scored the Knights' goal against Memphis. So congrats to the Knights again and on getting the draw. A draw is certainly better than a win, at least. And like I said, they might be kind of like it was toward the end of last year, right? You look at the record and you're like, oh gosh, they're not out of it, guys. Keep an eye out on it. This thing could get interesting in a hurry if things work out. And if Matthias Puzla gets hot down the stretch, look out. This could be really interesting. I'm looking forward to that game against Tulsa and the game against and seeing the result again at UConn. That should be interesting indeed.
Tough part of the schedule. I mean, that's the thing. The schedule has been front loaded. USF. I mean, remember USF? They could have won that match very easily. They had a lead,
right?
We're not able to do it, and now they're going to play the defending conference tournament champions in Tulsa. That's going to be tough there. And then Connecticut is a team and in fact, Connecticut I'm going to see up close in person this Friday. I'm actually working sideline for the American Digital Network. Big match, USF Connecticut, the two undefeateds in the conference. So I'll have a better idea about Connecticut when we talk about that matchup next week. I know this, UConn's very young and they're very defensive oriented. So, that's interesting. But the point is it's a front loaded schedule. So you're right. UCF's got some opportunities. If they can get a result, I think in one of these next two matches and then kind of lock in that second half, they can make a run to make the top four, and make the conference tournament.
Yeah. So we should be keeping an eye on them as they head down the stretch. And if they get hot, which I think there's certainly potential for that to happen, things could get really interesting for them. All right, volleyball. The Knights are 9-9 on the season right now, and it was a tough roadie this past weekend because they had to do that Tulsa-Dallas road trip. They lost in 5 at Tulsa and then got swept by SMU. So that's where the Knights stand right now, is 9-9, 2-4 in the league. But as I'm looking at the volleyball standings once again, UCF right now is tied for 6th in the league, and this is in a league that is just completely crowded in the middle. You've got Wichita and SMU, and we knew SMU is good. Wichita, SMU, they're both undefeated in the league, 6-0. Then you got 3 teams tied at 4-2, East Carolina, Temple, Cincinnati. Then you've got 5 teams tied at 2-4. UCF, UConn, Tulsa, USF, Houston. And we knew that it was going to be like this, right? I mean, Tulane 1-4, Memphis 0-5, kind of bringing up the rear there, but we knew this would be that this year would be like that. I mean, look at Cincinnati without Jordan Thompson. They got off to that bad start out of conference. They get into conference, they're 4-2 in the league, and they when it came into our house and beat us. We know how SMU is SMU right now. I mean, it's looking good. So the Knights are back at home this weekend, and they play the 2 Northeastern teams. UConn on Friday night, 7 p.m., and this is alumni weekend for UCF volleyball, and then Temple Sunday at 1, and that's the Dig Pink match. And again, looking at the standings, just a reminder: Temple 4-2, UConn 2-4. Winnable matches both, I think, for UCF, especially at home right now. And if you can get things done, you head out to that Houston-Tulane road trip that they have coming up, including that Tulane match, which will be on the American Digital Network in New Orleans. Then you could kind of collect yourself and get yourself ready to go for that home match against Wichita for Volleyball 10. That could be a big boost as you head down the stretch. So volleyball coming down the stretch, you got a lot. Like we said, there's still a lot of matches to go. I'm just counting over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 matches left to go this season in volleyball. So, compare that to soccer, where soccer's coming down the stretch now. I mean, and volleyball's ready to rock, man. Volleyball's still got a lot of games left.
Let me ask you this. So far in the 6 matches conference, each Friday night match has gone 5 sets.
Mm-hmm.
UCF is 2-1. Beating an East Carolina team that I think you would agree is probably the biggest surprise so far in the league. The way they've played. They have followed that up, losing to Cincinnati in 3 sets. Lost at SMU, who right now is sending a message that, hey, we're not just going to hand this conference to Wichita State.
Mm-hmm.
And they lost to Wichita State, so obviously the competition's been tough in the Sundays. How concerning, though, and I mean, it sounds weird. Do you think that playing a 5-set match on Friday has takes its toll in some of these Sunday results, where, the team doesn't come out as well? And I think that's kind of something. Can UCF get a 3 or 4 set win at some point here? I think would be just as big from a recovery standpoint, don't you think?
I don't think that's as big a factor as you do, though. Okay. I do think it is a factor because, I mean, you're talking about teams that, during the preseason, the quote preseason, they'll play double. What do you call it? They'll play games, double matches all the time. You could play 2 5-setters in one day, and then you got to come back the next day in a tournament and play again. Conference play is the easy part in terms of conditioning. Now on the road, I think it does matter. It does matter more than obviously if you're at home, because then the 5-setter things go a little bit late.
Which has happened here 2 of the 3 weekends.
That's right.
Right. It's happened here 2 of the 3 weeks. They've been on the road.
I guess my point is, yes, it is a factor. No, it is not a deciding factor. I just think that the deciding factor right now is the fact that the rest of the conference is good. The rest of the conference is really good. I mean, look around you. I mean, it got better with the addition of Wichita, and it's just this mishmash in the middle right now.
Well, and it didn't help that so far in the schedule they played the 2 top teams in the league right now on the road, obviously, Wichita State and SMU.
Yeah, and you'll get them back and you'll get them back at home. That's the other thing too.
The thing. They're going to have to win home matches. I mean, you can't. You're gonna, and you're right. I think this weekend's big. Connecticut's a big match, and Temple. Obviously, we've seen Temple. Though last year they played Temple twice. Each match went 5 sets. The road team won each one, which was interesting. Temple's a very good road team last year. This year, obviously, they've taking a step back a little bit. But that's the thing. You got to protect your home court, because you're right. It's going to be hard to win road matches. And you look at this window, Connecticut, Temple at home, at Houston, at Tulane. This is an important 4-match stretch here, because after that, you mentioned it, you got Wichita State coming on the 27th. And then Memphis, and then you got to go back on the road. So This is where they got to make a move here. If you're going to make the move, it's a good time to start, right?
Oh yeah, certainly. I think with those home matches, like you said, and we talked about you talked about how Temple is 4-2, but they're the team that has the best conference record out of everybody else who they're playing in these next 4 matches. UConn 2-4, 9-9 overall, just like UCF, but certainly at home winnable. Then you got Houston, who's 2-4. Tulane, who's 1-4 in the league, even though Tulane's 12-6. Remember, it's the conference season that is the one that everyone's going to pay attention to. So those are 2 winnable road matches. You could get at it. The best case scenario, by the way, and that's the situation. Best case scenario, say you win both matches at home, and you win both matches on the road. All of a sudden, you're 6-4 in the league, and you're up in that top third, and I think that's a good position to be when you're going to have those home matches coming back against SMU and Wichita State later on in the year. If you can get hot and you can stay healthy, anything's possible in this league. Certainly this year, I think. So I will be so we'll be paying close attention to that right now as well. So. Yeah, the schedule. We said from the beginning it was going to be tough, but now we're getting into the meat of it, and this one should start to get real interesting in a hurry. So again, UCF volleyball. Don't forget Friday, October the 13th, Friday the 13th, 7 p.m. on UCFnights.tv. As is the Temple match on Sunday at 1 p.m. So make sure you come on out for that on either side of homecoming for football on Saturday. All right. Speaking of the weekend, Lopez, let's wrap this thing up. What do you got going on?
Well, I'll be in Annapolis getting ready for you. No, I'm just I will.
No, that's
I actually
next week.
will be. That's what I'm looking ahead to. No, I will be in Tampa, believe it or not. I will be doing sideline for the big UConn USF men's soccer match. And we talked about it earlier. It's a big match. It's the top two teams in the league.
Yeah.
And it's UCF's going to be next week's opponent for UCF and UConn. So big rivalry there in men's soccer with USF and Connecticut. This will be the 10th meeting, Jeff. Believe it or not, 10th meeting between these two schools since they've joined in the conference here in 2013, the fall of was it 2013 or 24? No, 24. Was it 2013 or in the fall when the American got created? So these teams have a history. They played postseason, very different styles of approach. USF explosive offense, UConn dominant defense. So I'll be doing sideline for that one from Tampa. So I'm one of the few people, probably the only person that could say I'll be on campus for a USF homecoming weekend because they have their homecoming for men's soccer, and then obviously football on Saturday when UCF has their homecoming against East Carolina. It's an interesting weekend that I have scheduled myself here for.
Yeah, you're gonna be busy, but you're gonna be packing up the frequent flyer miles. I think that's for sure.
Maybe I might just fly out to Annapolis right now, though. I might just after this, I might just say, you know what, forget these. I might just go to Annapolis and put a sign there like "Bring Game Day here." I might just do that.
Just camp out in front of the campus at the Naval Academy.
That's right.
Right by the State House.
What could go wrong?
And by the way, I've been to Annapolis before. It really is beautiful. You're really going to enjoy it. So I think that's going to be fun. But nonetheless, hey, let's take care of business against East Carolina as well here. So don't forget, on blackandgoldbanneret.com, check out Brian Murphy's going to have his cram session preview article coming up in the next couple days here. Eric and I both have some stuff that you want to check out. And make sure you follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/blackandgoldbanneret. Also on Twitter at UCF_Banneret. I'm at Jeff_Sharon. Eric is at
Eric Lopez Elo.
And Brian is at Spokes_Murphy. Don't forget you can subscribe and rate this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and tuned in. We got a busy weekend of UCF sports. It's going to be fun. And don't forget, of course, yes, above all things, don't forget our live blog of UCF against East Carolina as the game happens. 7 o'clock kick on CBS Sports Network. If you can't make it to the game, make sure you follow along the live blog with us on blackandgoldbanneret.com. All right, Elo, thanks again, brother. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, guys. Have fun.
All right, and thanks to you, the listener. This has been the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. We will catch you again next week. Don't forget our live blog on Saturday for UCF against ECU. Happy homecoming.
Today's episode is brought to you by Cars.com. With over 2 million vehicles and 50,000 more added every day, Cars.com will match you with the perfect car for you, your budget, your life, your style. And if you're ready to say goodbye to your current car, Cars.com will get you an instant offer to cash it in. Just start by entering your license plate and get matched with a local dealer who will write you the check. So whether you're looking to buy or sell, just go to Cars.com. It's magical.